The Shining by Stanley Kubrick and Prisoners by Denis Villeneuve may seem like very different movies on the surface, but in reality they are very much the same story. While one is a supernatural horror and the other a suspense thriller, they both focus on a similar journey, one of being lost in a maze. What is up? I am the G.I. Joel, and this is the first episode of a new series where I'm going to be analyzing some of my favorite stories. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and bell notification to join the G.I. Joel Nation. Before we begin to compare and contrast these two movies, first we need to establish the importance of the labyrinth and its place in storytelling. The labyrinth is one of the oldest symbols in human history, dating back as far as 2500 BCE, possibly even further. According to the psychologist Carl Jung, the labyrinth is a primordial symbol. That means it's a symbol which are older than the historical man, which are inborn in him from the earliest times, eternally living, outlasting all generations, that still make up the groundwork of the human psyche. Now, essentially what this means is that labyrinths are more than just a symbol used in storytelling. They are a part of who we are as human beings. Jung believed that the labyrinth had multiple meanings and all could be represented in more symbols. The labyrinth represents many things for our discussion, and we will be focusing on its meaning as a part of the hero's journey into the underworld. Mazes are filled with deception and peril, but if our hero is able to survive the trials of the maze, they can find growth and redemption at its center. Now, the image of a labyrinth is very apparent in both of these films, but the end result on our main characters is very different. Let's begin our comparison with Jack Torrance of The Shining and Keller Dover of Prisoners. Both men enter the symbolic maze in search of something. Jack in search of inspiration for his next novel, and Keller of search of his missing daughter. And while both men are tempted throughout their journeys, Keller is able to resist the darkness and evil he faces, while Jack succumbs to it. Keller eventually becomes trapped in his pursuit of his daughter, but by sticking to his beliefs and his convictions, he is able to call out for help to Detective Loki. While Jack becomes trapped, he is incapable of rescue and becomes stuck in the labyrinth forever. Now, another large parallel to draw between these films is the story of the victims of the labyrinth. From Prisoners, we have Alex Jones and Bob Taylor, and from The Shining, we have the infamous twins. Alex and Bob both become victims of the labyrinth very early in their lives, and even though they survive, they are forever trapped in their attempts to escape. The same could be said of the twins. They are also forever and eternally trapped in this maze. And all of these characters eventually become agents of the underworld. Now, the visual representation of the labyrinth is rife throughout both of these films. In The Shining, there is the literal hedge maze, but also the Overlook Hotel in itself is a sort of maze. But interestingly enough, both mazes are known and mastered by Danny, who is able to navigate these labyrinths and doesn't become trapped like his father. In Prisoners, the maze is a reoccurring symbol in the investigation of the kidnappings, as well as a tool of the kidnappers. It is also evident throughout the film in nature. The trees, the forests, are a maze of their own, representing the internalization of the labyrinth onto our characters. And much like Danny in The Shining, Detective Loki is able to navigate the journey. In summary, both of these films rely heavily on the use of the maze to different effects. In The Shining, we see what happens when faced with the temptations and perils of the journey into the proverbial underworld and are unable to overcome them. And in Prisoners, we see how holding true to who you are and testing your values against the same trials can lead to redemption. If you've seen either of these films, I would love to hear your thoughts about them down in the comments. Now be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next video.